Oh, the Rated R Radio Star is here. And if you're wondering about the audio, oh yes, I am on my trusty Kingston HyperX Cloud 2 headset. So, because on location, baby. But got your hookup for you for your little Wednesday Q&A. And boy, we've got a lot of questions to get to. I'm going to try and get to all of them, but I don't know. I don't know if we'll make it. I want to say thank you to everybody. Well, a few things are in order. I want to say thank you to everyone that really enjoyed the egoism episode that I did recently. In fact, it was just last week. I believe it was on Thursday or Friday that I released it, talking about the recent translation of Max Stirner's seminal work, that being The Ego in Its Own, or as it's known in its recent translation by Wolfie Landstreicher, Unique in Its Property. Glad everybody got something out of that. I may get to, someone asked a Q&A question in reference to that I may get to this week. I'll kind of save that one more towards the end. Got a lot of tech questions to get into that I want to answer, but maybe they're ones that I can answer kind of quickly. So also I want to mention, and the link is in the appendix of the show notes for this episode and pretty much every Q&A going forward. There is the website, retroshare.sovereigntech.com. Of course, that's RetroShare, like the software, RetroShare that I've been talking about for many years. And it's retroshare.sovereigntech.com. If you are a patron and you want to get access, I mean, it is really active. There's chat rooms. There's great content available. Like, I mean, believe me, content that you want. Like all the stuff that I talk about. And, you know, you can't beat the price. But if you want to get your hands on all of that, a lot of people are really excited. There's a full directory at retroshare.sovereigntech.com. That's the website. That'll give you your hookup. And I mean, it's really cool. I love the fact, because look, I didn't do any of this. Yeah, I set up that page, you know, and I made things, you know, kind of happen there. But it's the Sovereign Tech listeners, the Sovereignati, the Sovereign Tech sweaties, that are really making this happen, that are really, you know, finally creating a community using open source software that's the real deal, that if necessary could, well, quite frankly, you know, replace the internet or the World Wide Web and just about every other part that we know of the internet, other than perhaps, you know, the infrastructure. But anyway, it's so exciting. It's so beautiful. I haven't been super active on it in the past couple of weeks, but I'll be there. You know, I think it's phenomenal. I'm always getting little notifications on my laptop saying that somebody connects on RetroShare, and every time I see it, I just, you know, little swell of pride there, baby, because it's just so cool to see people using it. So thank you. Special thanks to Aaron E., you know, who is the one, definitely a person you want to connect with on there, but you can connect with everybody. But, you know, he's really been leading the charge, and everybody else has just been, you know, rocking and rolling with it as well. Just so cool. So thanks for that. That's awesome. Yeah, I get a thank you out to everybody that's been so active and has been so, you know, using the Facebook, the secret Sovereign Tech Facebook group, Sovereign Tech Uncensored, that is already, in my opinion, wildly popular, especially compared. Let me tell you, I've been in a few groups on Facebook in my day, and none of them, there we go, none of them have the action and have the stuff that's going on in that group. I mean, it is hot. It is white hot, and I just love it. And, you know, something I noticed about Facebook groups, like originally, and I don't know if it's because however many people end up getting into the group or whatever, like I used to be able to see every post that gets made in there by everybody that's in there, and I was doing my best, you know, to try, and I've been doing my best to try and interact with everybody that posts on there, you know, and I'm really honored. A lot of people said it's their favorite part of Facebook already. A lot of people have said, you know, it feels like a safe space for them to talk about things, and absolutely, I think that's beautiful. And so I want to reinforce that, and I want to, you know, make sure everybody's having a good time, or talking about the serious stuff when they need to, you know. But I don't get notifications now for every post. I don't know if because there's so many, I don't understand what that is. So if I miss people's posts, like, I apologize. Just tag me if you really want me to be involved, and I'm happy, you know, to check it out. But I mean, it's so active. I can't possibly keep track of everything. But that's beautiful. That's great. Like, I'm really okay with that. So I'm glad everybody gets to use it. But if something needs to be brought to my attention, you know, just tag me on there. So that's been going great as well. Of course, if you don't already know, you know, it's not just a Patreon perk. This is something for everybody, for every Sovereign Tech fan, and even people that may not listen to the show so much but are just part of the Cool Kids Club. You just got to friend me on Facebook, facebook.com/Brian Sovereign. Friend me, then you message me, and you PM me, and I'll get you into the group. Let me know you want to be in the group, and I'll get I've got your hookup. A lot of people have loved, and I'll tell you something. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this. One of the things that I've been doing every day, I post some kind of sexy art in the morning, and everybody just loves that. I mean, in fact, some people have said to me, they said, "Wow, my day was shitty, but I got home and I saw this artwork, and seriously, I just feel better." And that's so great. It's kind of the only place, like a secret group like that I'm the admin of, is really one of the only places, because most people aren't on Twitter. So one of the only more popular places, I guess, where I can share that. And maybe other people can feel comfortable interacting with it and giving me the feedback about it and whatever, there's tits showing, there's the whole thing, and it's just, it's so cool. I've always wanted to share that sort of stuff. But, if you show nipples on Instagram, they'll take you down. Somebody will report you, whatever. On Facebook, I've been reported a billion times for the artwork I used to share years ago when I cared more about Facebook. But anyway, so that's been really enjoyable. And honestly, that's almost half the reason I created the group, because I want to be able to share this art and I want people to see it. And it's so beautiful also to have people all across the gender spectrum digging the work, digging the artwork. That's fucking awesome. That's the future. In my opinion, that's the future happening right there. So yeah, I love it. Anyway, probably got a little Star Wars update that'll be coming out in the next couple weeks. Of course, the book for Inferno Squadron just came out yesterday, and I've already been digging into it. I can't wait. I think this is phenomenal. But anyway, I don't want to get ahead of myself. But we'll be doing a Star Wars update episode real soon. Let's get into the questions. Let's just do it. I think there might have been some other things I wanted to talk to everybody about, but fuck. Oh yes, okay, all right. No, this one's important. So something that I'm going to be doing, and I experimented with it last week, and the response I got was just tremendous. And I kind of figured it was. That is, I'm going to, the Prime episodes of Sovereign Tech, not really going to add anything to them, not going to do anything special to them, but I'm going to release them in the main Sovereign Tech feed that everybody's been using for years. And now I'm also going to add them into the Sovereign Tech Patreon feed. Everybody said, pretty much across the board, that they loved having everything in one singular feed. They have all the Patreon episodes, all the bonus content, and then the Prime episodes in one feed. So you got it, baby. I will absolutely, it doubles my work a bit, but I'm happy. I'm more than happy to do that for the patrons. You guys, gals, and Z's, you really make all this happen. I'm more than happy to do that. I did release the episode a day early last week. I don't know if that's going to be a thing that'll happen often. Nobody seemed to really, some people like that. Other people are like, yeah, I'm not too concerned about getting it early, but I do love having it in a singular feed. So I'm going to make that happen. There's a little Patreon, I guess, perk for you. And that's nice too, especially if, to some degree, SoundCloud really does shit the bed, which I'm not opposed to that happening. That's obviously an immediate backup thing that can happen. I have to experiment with some of this stuff more, because I'm doing a major restructuring of Patreon. Like I talked about, I think it was last week. I really need to hire somebody, and I have especially one person in mind, but I already have I have other people in mind that I would love to hire and have them just help make Sovereign Tech, Sex and Science Hour, Zomia Offline Games, Audio of the Ancients, all the books, Dark Android, the fiction, the newsletter, the whole thing, a real professional. Okay. And I already have one gal in mind, but a real professional that I could hire, pay right, do it right. And I know she could do it right. So anyway, that's something that I'm looking to make happen, because we're growing, baby. This is getting, yeah, I think I cracked a joke when I do my little whenever I get a new patron, which welcome to the new patrons. I know some of you just joined up. I do my little ding, another Sovereign Tech Patreon, and then I'll say some bullshit underneath it. And I said, we're going to need a bigger boat. Yeah, it's getting to the point. We're going to need a bigger fucking boat. It's getting wild. So please, patrons, I'll just ask you this. Please keep sharing the show. Please keep telling people about the show. All right, get people on board with the stuff. I know some of you already have gotten me new listeners, have even gotten me new patrons and all that. I am so honored by that. Let's get this thing out there because Sovereign Tech is such a unique animal. It really is. It works on so many levels. Honestly, I don't know many podcasts that even work on the levels that Sovereign Tech is working on. And I'm not boasting about it. Okay. I had people, this is a question that I got. I had people email me. We're going to get into tech questions here. I had people email me and say, you have any tips or tricks, for creating a podcast and all that stuff? 4 years ago, I got that. I was asked that a lot, and I did actual bonus special episodes that were totally free. You can still find them where I gave tips. And I think there might have even been some early Patreon Q&As, where I, people asked, if I wanted to start a podcast, how would I go about it? And I gave my tips and tricks and all that stuff, but you know what, to do what I'm doing, I don't think I could tell you, all I'm doing, and this is the response I gave to the person. All I'm doing is I'm making the content, be it what you read, see, hear, play, whatever. I'm making the content that I want to exist in the world. That's my only trick. That's my only secret. It's all I'm doing. It's what I want to be out there. The kind of stuff I want to listen to, the kind of stuff I want to hear. And does that include orgy scenes, people moaning, and whatever else going on? Woo, yeah, you better believe it. That's what I want. And so I make it. Do I want my video games with sex in it? Fuck yes. So I make them. Do I want my stories, with high drama and all this other shit? Yeah, so I write them. Do I want books out there that can tell people from stem to stern how to start encrypting their fucking devices? You bet your ass I do. So I wrote it. That's the only trick I've got, is I just make what I want. I guess I just happen to have very diverse tastes. And that lends to me making all kinds of things, even albums, music. I write music. I have a lot of fun doing it too. Anyway, so let's get into the tech questions finally here. Woo. So, and this one actually went right to the bbs@sovereigntech.com email address, the primary email address. I see a lot /many/most of the Kodi help/tips sites are pushing VPN use. Since the latest version, 17 point whatever, of Kodi apparently uses encrypted connections apparently using encrypted connections via VPN. I mean, that's not exactly how I wrote it. Is really required, or isn't really required. Just a good idea, or is it even? Is it all really necessary? I'm just kind of a novice on this stuff, but have been around the net for over 20 years and have not had any problems. And TIA. That's terrible. I don't know what TIA means. Anyway, TIA, and I listen to all the shows, Patreon, or maybe thanks for everything. I don't know. I listen to all the shows and Patreon as well. So it's a patron. So I'll answer this here. So Kodi, we actually talked about Kodi and kind of torrenting and all that stuff. That was a few Patreon episodes back. As far as using a VPN with Kodi, yeah, absolutely. I recommend that because it's a matter of time before a lot of the super cookie and spiders and web spiders that a lot of the ISPs and whoever else are putting out there are eventually going to track these streaming sites a lot harder and may potentially track them back to you. So I think using a VPN, especially on a dedicated device and on dedicated software like Kodi, for those that don't know, Kodi is this, it's the kind of the sequel to XMBC, which is this kind of overlay on your operating system, and you can run it on just about anything. It was originally made for the OG Xbox, the original Xbox from, before the 360. That's why they called it XMBC. Anyway, or XBMC, whatever it was. So Kodi is this really great media software that just, makes your library pretty, can also stream stuff off of streaming sites and to some degree through torrenting and all that. It's very slick software. I'm a major supporter of Kodi. I think it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. I think Kodi boxes are just fantastic. They have my full support. Yes, I would absolutely run a VPN. Is it necessary? No. But is it a good idea to be on top of these things? Oh, you bet. You bet. Because, they can't go after everybody that's using Kodi. That'd be impossible for the MPAA and ISPs and the RIA or whoever else to go after everybody using Kodi. However, they will make martyrs of some people when they really want to go after that. And you don't want that to be you. And I don't want it to be you, not just because you're a patron donor, okay? But I just don't want it to be you. I don't want it to be anybody. So please do use a VPN, because it is very easy to set up in Kodi, and it doesn't affect the rest of your network. And I'll give you the quick tips on how to do it right with Kodi. Okay, so you don't really suffer too much as far as speed. What you're going to want to do is, to be on the safe side, okay, you're going to get the VPN service you want to get it from private internet access. That way you can use it on however many devices you have. You don't just have to use it with Kodi. Okay, but go with private internet access. You can go to privateinternetaccess.com. You can find it there. And I mean, you can even, and this is amazing, you talk about things you can do with Zcash, like you can donate to Sovereign Tech with Zcash, and thank you for those that do. You can actually purchase a VPN subscription with Zcash. I do. And it's just, that's such an awesome thing. But you can use Bitcoin, you can use all kinds of things if you want to anonymize it. I've talked about how to use a VPN many times. But you're going to want to use private internet access. That's the one I recommend. And then you're going to want to connect. I think Kodi allows you to choose what server you want to go to. You want to go with a Netherlands server. Okay, a server in the Netherlands for legal reasons. If you find that it's just too slow when you're using the Netherlands server, well then yeah, use one in the US that's the farthest away from you. Okay, but bottom line is absolutely encrypt your Kodi, what you're doing with Kodi if you're streaming and all that stuff. I really do recommend using a VPN. I mean, I recommend everybody use a VPN for all kinds of reasons. Another great thing is really just to send the market signal that no, people give a shit about security and privacy and encryption. I think that's a beautiful thing completely on its own. So yeah, that's my recommendation there. Okay, so that question's out of the way. Do you use a VPN? I really don't want anybody, getting fined or, who knows what else is going to go on. I mean, because they're starting to crack down on this shit. It's getting pretty ugly out there. So, okay. Let's see, what was or is the biggest, most used encryption software? Still getting back into the tech world for almost 10 years out of the game. Someone was telling me TrueCrypt. Okay, so if you are, to answer this one, if you are looking to encrypt, do either whole hard drive encryption, say on a Windows computer or something along those lines. If you're going with Linux, you can actually do entire disk encryption right from your install of, say, Ubuntu or one of Ubuntu's one of the Ubuntu-based distributions of Linux. But if you're doing it independently, or if you want to have like just an encrypted partition or an encrypted file on your drive, I would recommend not TrueCrypt, but VeraCrypt. It's been a little while. TrueCrypt is fine. There wasn't necessarily a whole lot wrong with it, but there was that mysterious event that happened, 2-3 years ago now, where the developers of TrueCrypt suddenly said, see you later, here, use this, and they released a version of TrueCrypt, one last version on their website that I think could only read and couldn't actually make an encrypted file. And so everybody freaked the fuck out when this happened. I think this is like 2013 or 2014. Everybody freaked out because they said, is there something wrong with TrueCrypt? I've kind of staked my life on this software maybe, and they started to freak out. Well, Matthew Green and some other members, security researchers, I believe it was at Johns Hopkins University, did an independent audit of the code for TrueCrypt, and it was found to be, pretty much fine. So whatever happened there, we don't know. But VeraCrypt, VERA, I'll put a link in the show notes. VeraCrypt has taken the charge of, it's in fact, as Roger Paxton of the Lava Flow podcast and Resist the Empire podcast, who is a sponsor, by the way. But he, knowledgeable guy and longtime listener of Sovereign Tech, he said it very nicely. He said VeraCrypt just picked up where TrueCrypt left off, and I agree. It's the best option out there. If you're doing whole disk encryption, I have seen where using it on a Windows computer, where like the boot up process for Windows gets significantly slowed down by VeraCrypt, so that could be problematic. Now, if you're only trying to encrypt from your run-of-the-mill bad guy and your run-of-the-mill malicious hacker, and we're not talking about alphabet soup organizations like the NSA, AT&T, or CIA, something like that, then, and if you're using Windows, frankly, you could use, if you have a pro version of Windows, be it Windows 7 Pro or Windows 7 Ultimate or Windows 7 Professional, or if you have Windows 10 Pro or Windows 8.1 Pro or whatever they were calling those, you have access to Microsoft's own baked-in encryption software, which is BitLocker. Now, I wouldn't count on BitLocker to stop any kind of state actor whatsoever. It's just not going to. But if you're just trying to encrypt in general and just trying to, keep people from messing with your shit, the run-of-the-mill person or some malicious hacker, at Starbucks or something, yeah, go ahead and use BitLocker. It's easy. You don't run into the potential speed problems that have been trying to get worked on for a while with Veracrypt. Again, it's not a huge issue, and it varies based upon the hardware you're using Veracrypt on. But anyway, BitLocker is a totally fine option for that. But just keep in mind, who you're using that against. Other people want to just encrypt stuff with PGP. Totally legitimate, totally fine. But Veracrypt is really that's the one I recommend. I use it all the time on multiple platforms. So it's a fine and dandy piece of software, and there's great development going on, and it's still very actively developed, which is really important when it comes to this sort of thing. Okay. Let's move on from that. Grammarly, the free, and the person put it in quotes because nothing is free, grammar/spelling correction tool would have seemed like a perfectly benign and even amazingly useful tool had I not been a Sovereign Tech fan. But now that Brian made me paranoid to death, I won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Who else thinks that an app/software that tracks everything you type is bad for your health? On the other hand, given that my swipe keyboard and probably everything else on my laptop and phone is tracking anyway, should I be worried? What's the consensus on Grammarly? And then they did hashtag Tool of the Week and hashtag Wednesday Q&A, which they did this in the Facebook group, the Sovereign Tech Uncensored Facebook group, which is where some of these questions come from. So Grammarly, I've used this in the past. It is an extension that works in your browser generally. I think Grammarly now has like their own like text editor writing software of a sort as well that they make available. But Grammarly works across the internet and will try and fix the grammar and spelling of everything you do, no matter what part of the internet that you happen to be on. Now, I like far more granular control, and I consistently type very strange things and very weird things. So services like Grammarly take me far too long. Me personally, I understand why people use them, and I think they do offer somewhat of a great service. But they, it would take too long to set up, and so I don't fucking bother with that. Sometimes to my, maybe it would be helpful if I did, because like even in my newsletters, I notice a lot of typos or mistakes or something like that, which is part of the reason I need to hire somebody to help. So, because I just barely have, time's always an issue. But yeah, Grammarly is absolutely tracking everything you type, and it's collecting it. I'm not saying it's collecting it necessarily for anything nefarious, but what I think is going on with Grammarly is it's not to collect necessarily information, though it can certainly take the dolphins with the tuna. But what I think the tuna is in the thing that they're trying to catch with their net, is they are creating a writing algorithm. Okay, like in a system similar to what's baked into Microsoft Word that Microsoft has been collecting and making and cobbling together and collating for as long as Microsoft Word has been a thing. How do people type? What mistakes do they usually make? How can this be fixed? And so Grammarly is probably selling off what they do, and the reason that they can offer the service for free, because like the person said, like the patron said, nothing is. Yeah, I think what they're doing is they're collecting it for an algorithm to help with writing in general. I mean, and that's largely benign, but at the same time, yes, they are collecting all of that data about you. Now, to answer the question about, given that my swipe keyboard and probably everything else on my laptop and phone is being tracked anyway, should I be worried? Yeah, I totally understand that perspective. First off, if you want to use a keyboard that probably isn't tracking you, you want to use the hacker keyboard on Android. For iOS, you're just going to have to trust Apple and use their stock, use their stock keyboard that they have. But as far as like swipe and everything being collected on your phone, like doesn't matter. I mean, the whole thing here is just to make it expensive for them. Give the alphabet soup organizations or the advertisers, the corporatist masters, if I dare use that phrase, just give them a hard time. Whatever system just makes it easier. I mean, the systems that make it easier for you, honestly, make it easier for them. That's a very simple rule. And most corporatist, most corporations, most companies, especially ones based in the U.S., have a revolving door, for the government whenever it's needed. So, yeah, I get it. Like, well, you've got that block of sensors in your pocket, like your smartphone, and really that makes every other privacy move you make moot. No, not really. I mean, yeah, I totally understand that point, and I agree with it in many ways. But still, make it expensive for them. Make it expensive for them. You can make it harder, okay, for these groups to collect stuff. And honestly, like, especially the local police and a lot of that, I mean, a lot of these tools really do thwart them. And most people's, negative interactions with authorities generally comes in the form of municipalities and local authorities. So you can totally screw the local authorities with this shit by all means. So again, don't make it easy for them. That's all. I totally understand that, I completely respect and love the patron that asked this. I'm just saying, like we can. It's not. Well, throw up the hands. It's never really that. But yeah, Grammarly, that's what I think that it's about, is that it's not really about collecting all of your information and everything you do. In fact, honestly, it's a bad idea for them to collect that. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't, but it's a bad idea for them to collect that, because then they could be on the hook in some form or fashion. Even if you, click on I agree, you click their little checkbox for their terms of service that says we're not liable for any leak or something that happens with the data we collect in Grammarly or whatever. They could still be on the hook. I mean, I've talked about this many times, and it's not my idea. It's an idea of, that's kind of sweeping Silicon Valley, thankfully. And it's data collection minimization, meaning that you don't want to be on the hook for the data that you potentially collect. So don't collect so much. Like, that's really becoming a big deal. So it's in their best interest to kind of anonymize it and just, like I said, I think they're going for some kind of a special writing algorithm. I mean, one of the golden keys, or, one of the golden tickets, I think one of these days, that eventually some company's going to create is, and this will be done through machine learning and algorithms and all that, is software where you could put in like certain events that you want to happen in a story. You can put in your characters, you can put in all this stuff, and then it completely writes a novel for you. It is just a matter of time before that happens. That doesn't mean that those novels are going to be great, because they're not. They're fucking not. Because great writing, in my, I mean, again, art is kind of in the eye of the beholder, right? It's subjective, to some degree. For me, the great writers don't follow much in the way of grammar rules. I mean, they don't do misspellings, and if they do, they're intentional. Like, there's a purpose to their misspelling. I mean, there's just a lot of little tricks that make you remember when you're reading a story, like a misspelling or funny characters or something. I don't mean funny characters as in people. I mean funny characters as in like text that will appear. Odd run-on sentences and all this other stuff. All these little writing magic tricks. Like Harlan Ellison is phenomenal at doing that sort of thing, among others. Like, I think those are the great works, and you could say, well, eventually the algorithm can kind of figure that out, but it's always going to be some kind of random generator, some kind of random trick, and it's not going to have the same flow that the human mind, can really put to the page, digital or otherwise. So, but someday that software is going to happen, and I wouldn't be surprised if Grammarly was, kind of on the, on the bleeding edge of creating that kind of software. So, just to give you an example of what they would use that kind of algorithm for. Anyway, so yeah, I'm not a fan of Grammarly, but I mean, I think if you feel you need Grammarly, you need Grammarly. Does that make sense? Like if you do that much, If you write that much, you fill out stuff that much, whatever, and you're, very concerned about how Grammarly works with that, or, you're very concerned that you're going to make mistakes and all that, and Grammarly can help you out, then yeah, you need Grammarly. It's the argument is similar to I need a lot of services that Microsoft uses. Is Windows tracking every fucking thing I do? You bet your goddamn ass it is. But I'm going to use Windows because it's how I'm going to get this shit done. It's how I'm going to get this stuff out there. Okay, and so there's the weighing of costs, and then there's the benefits. So if you feel you need Grammarly, use it. That's really it. But yes, it is collecting all of your info, and eventually somebody might want to make use of that. Okay, so let's see. Here's another one. Hey Brian, today I was recommended Wine. Wine is not an emulator. So Stallion breaking in. Wine is an acronym for what is effectively really an emulator, even though the acronym WINE stands for Wine is not an emulator. But what it is it's a compatibility layer, I guess more accurately, that allows you to run Windows software, Win32 and DLLs and all that, within Linux somewhat natively. Okay, and this is similar. This doesn't just get done with Windows. If you're a user of BSD, like FreeBSD or my personal favorite, OpenBSD, BSD has a compatibility layer similar to Wine that allows you to run Linux. Now, the beauty there is that Linux is to some degree based on BSD and back and forth. It's a long conversation, a lot of synergy going on there. But within that, you have where some Linux software actually runs cleaner and leaner and faster within BSD because there's not a lot of that Linux bloat. This can also happen when you use something like Wine, where actually sometimes, because you don't have such a bloated operating system like Windows is, no matter how much Microsoft tries to make it more efficient, and they really do work towards that. It's a fact. Some stuff works really nicely with Wine. In fact, my games from Zomia Offline Games, Hyperchronius and Ninja Trek, they both work with Wine. I made sure of that. So anyway, and they're originally only for Windows, though that may be changing in the very near future. All right, so let's read on. Hey, Brian, today I was recommended Wine. Wine is not an emulator. It's a way to move completely from Windows over to Linux. Are you familiar with it? If so, what are your thoughts? Could I handle the entire process of podcasting and website management with it? Here's and he puts a link in the show notes. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. Yeah, Wine's been around for a while. I'm very familiar with it. I use it. I've used it quite a bit over the years. What's happened in the past decade, frankly, is that other than, say, Microsoft Office, which technically you could run in a web browser with Office Online, and Adobe, which also is the day is coming where you can run Adobe software, like Photoshop or Elements or whatever, in a web browser. They're working very hard towards that. Okay. It's getting to the point to where it's hard to think of what things you would run in Windows that don't already exist on Linux now in the past 10 years, like for podcasting. Use Audacity. Just makes sense. Or the things that don't work with, or that they don't already have ported, that they don't already have natively set up for Linux, generally they're coming up with some kind of web-based model for it to where you could do it in your browser or something. Running this, but the important software, kind of like what I just mentioned, Office, Adobe, Photoshop and all this other stuff, none of that will work with Wine. Wine is limited. It's not perfect. It doesn't allow everything to just suddenly run. There's a lot of dependencies you've got to work with. It can be a real pain in the ass to set up, even today, even though it's something that's been in active development probably for 15, maybe even longer years. I really can't remember. It's hard for me to even remember a time where there was Linux and Wine didn't exist in some form. So I think, it's actually and I've done this in the past, it's totally possible to run a podcast and handle a website if you're using, say, WordPress or something like that. Using Linux stock without even needing Wine. That doesn't even need to be a part of the program. But I don't know exactly, I need to know what software precisely, you need that doesn't exist within Linux, that you would need Wine for. That's kind of the thing. But if it's anything related to Adobe, you're screwed. Like, it's just not going to work with Wine. It's not going to happen. I mean, it may eventually work web-based, and then you can use it, on the things even beyond Linux. But anyway, that's the story with that. So, I mean, Wine is great, and it runs a lot of things really well. In fact, I mean, honestly, one of the reasons for years that I initially would install Wine, and this is going to sound crazy, but because it would automatically come installed with the Windows version of Notepad, not WordPad, not Microsoft Word, just stock, Notepad.exe. Just that good old-fashioned Notepad.exe. I love that little piece of software. I've been using that talk about something as far back as I can remember. I've been using that forever. And I still use it to this day. It's still the best, cleanest fucking note-taking app and simplest out there. In fact, it's really, really enjoyable for that because, particularly, because so many note-taking and notepad apps and all this, like, do this auto-formatting with shit. And when you're trying to copy and paste, like, say, show notes or something else into other websites and other platforms, it always fucks it up, and the spacing's always weird and everything. But you do it with Notepad, and you get exactly what what you see is what you get. So there was a long time where I just used Wine just to have that good old Notepad. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. So anyway, yeah, Wine, again, it works. I just don't know what I'm not sure, and you can tell me, because I don't know everything. I'm not sure exactly what software would be needed that doesn't already, A, natively exist on Linux, or B, that could actually even work with Wine in the first place. Like, I don't know. So, okay, so I'll leave the link in the show notes for that if people want to check that out. I mean, I could imagine some old pieces of software, kind of like in this past week's episode. Was it episode 234? Or 235, where I talked about AppleWorks. Maybe that was a previous week. Anyway, when I talked about AppleWorks, like, you could use Wine to actually get AppleWorks up and running, but that's old Windows software, and for those old, out of development kind of, Windows pieces of software, yeah, Wine's great for that. So, and to run it on Linux, great. But anyway, okay, let's move on. All right, I'm going to skip ahead one, then I'll go back. So let's see, how are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing great. So, and this is from a patron. Brian, I heard you mention digital feudalism on the latest episode of Sovereign Tech. It's an interesting / terrifying idea. Do you have any sources you'd be willing to share? Okay, so digital feudalism is this idea that, you're kind of turning, I mean, it's feudalism just put in the digital form. This is an idea that I toyed with before episode 100 of Sovereign Tech, and understand that was years ago, years and years ago. And I'll be honest, and I told it to this person. I said, I was like, I was scared to talk about digital feudalism. Like, I saw it coming, and I was really afraid because I figured people would think I'm crazy by saying that. But now it's not crazy. Now fucking every tech journalist over the past couple of years at least has said, you know what, Facebook's really their own nation. This is what's happening is that you're getting the siloing. We're going back to kind of the AOL, CompuServe days, Prodigy days, and all that, where everything's within a closed garden, and they're really, really trying for this. There's a huge conversation to be had around this whole concept. Okay, but people are really getting, trapped and stuck in them. I think on last week's Q&A, I even admitted that, I was, I'm very much in Microsoft's ecosystem, and a lot of people get stuck in Apple's ecosystem, and then you get tied up in all that. Or then the extreme ends of where this happens is that you have Ethereum, where absolutely by design. It's something I've talked about for many years on Sovereign Tech. I mean, we're talking about what I've called tyranny of the code, where, you're building these, again, I mean, everything's really kind of happening digitally anyway. The only thing that keeps effectively nations from being digital in their entire existence anyway is just the necessity for a mailbox, for an address in a mailbox where they can ship you whatever you order on Amazon or something, right? So yeah, we're already in a world where there's entire digital nations. I mean, and it's not just like Facebook or some of these big companies. It's companies you might not even think about. I mean, in a very real sense, like Electronic Arts with their Origin platform, they're a fucking country. They have their own, I mean, in some ways, they have their own money and all kinds of other shit. Steam, I mean, so many of these things really are already what we very much consider and what we very much expect as services from systems of governance that are already there. And really all it takes is for one of these companies at some point to kind of like tighten the grip a bit, and then you're really held within it. And that's how you end up with digital feudalism. And there's more to it than that, but there's not. I mean, that's a very brief intro to the notion. The person asked for resources. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of great books on this. You could read the essay "Dark Enlightenment" from Nick Land. There's some of the works of accelerationists, which I might talk about accelerationists and accelerationism at some point, because they kind of talk about this notion of digital feudalism, but they come from a perspective where they think that it's the last straw before we have a final change in the status quo. That's a huge subject. So anyway, yeah, there's not a lot of great works on this notion, but a lot of people are picking up on that digital feudalism is very much happening, and it's happening with the major tech companies, with blockchain technologies. Not to say that inherently blockchain technologies are bad or anything. I'm not saying that at all. But that they can be used to, create something close to a government, if not a full-on government, especially when how do you enforce what happens on these blockchains, right? So anyway, let's move on. Let's move on from that. I just wanted to, get that out in the open air and just say there's really not a whole lot out there on the subject, frankly. So, all right, let's get into another question. And this one, I'll tell you, the person that asked it, if they have like any points or comments after the fact, in fact, someday I just want to do a show with this guy. I'll tell you that straight up. But hell, I'd love to do tons of shows with this guy. But he's certainly welcome. And if anybody has any points on this, you're certainly welcome to respond with them, and I will redress this question as needed. So I'll just read it here. I have a Patreon question for you for your next Q&A. In your opinion, what is the main difference in Stirner's egoism and Ayn Rand's virtue of selfishness? Ooh, great question. And this is obviously in response to, like I said, the very well-received, very popular Patreon episode that I did last week about egoism. And I think it was episode 114 or something like that. Anyway, so the difference, I'm not going to spend all the time in the world describing what egoism is. Please go back and listen to that episode. There's a video on my YouTube channel that is all about my description of egoism, how it relates to hedonism and all that. You can listen to that. There's not a stitch of that I would change. So if you want to hear about egoism, I'm just going to recommend, because that's a whole conversation in itself. I can give very simple explanations of egoism, but they require a lot of unpacking that I just don't have time for here in this Q&A so much, though it might come up. But anyway, so if anyone has any critiques of what I'm about to say here, please feel free to share them. So the main difference between Stirner's egoism and Ayn Rand's virtue of selfishness. So first off, I'm actually a fan of both. I really appreciate. Atlas Shrugged was a huge deal for me. The Fountainhead was a huge fucking deal for me in my path to liberty and anarchism, as it were, even though Ayn Rand's not an anarchist whatsoever. Virtue of Selfishness, tremendous book. All of her books are tremendous. I don't agree with everything in them necessarily, but objectivism with a small o, not the capital O, culty objectivism, is a fantastic thing. That A is A, existence exists, all that. I think that's kind of, that's phenomenal. And doesn't, those basic points really don't have an issue with egoism. In fact, I dare say there's not a whole lot of differences between the two. And in fact, I'm fairly certain Ayn Rand has quoted Stirner in her own works. And spoke relatively favorably of him, other than the fact that egoism, even though Stirner wouldn't use the word anarchism, egoism does eventually lead to anarchism. Genuine egoism taken all the way with, the concepts of love and empathy and all that just leads to anarchism. Now, when you don't include that second part of egoism, that being the love and empathy, you can end up with fascism, certainly. So, I can be appreciative of that point. So I don't think either of these are really that different, because I think Ayn Rand's work is hedonism, just as the video I just mentioned, that's on my YouTube channel, which is very popular, few thousand, watches, whatever, I think on my channel. They're both kind of hedonism. They're both forms of hedonism. Ayn Rand's virtuous selfishness, I guess the main difference that I would see there between it and egoism, I'd probably say it comes down to, I guess it'd probably come down to the property question. If that was, if I was really to take it to brass tacks, like the main difference is that really objectivism, or the virtuous selfishness, or Ayn Rand's philosophy, which is called objectivism, and in this case I kind of mean the capital O, I guess. Objectivism relies heavily on the notion of owning property. Egoism doesn't. Egoism has no, at least Max Stirner's egoism, has no hard dogma on property, and the main concern, or the reason that Stirner made it very clear, particularly when you read in Stirner's critics, not just the unique in its property. The reason that he doesn't have a hard dogma on private property, on owning property, is because he said it can become its own form of tyranny. Effectively meaning that having this like really hard edge, it's like, okay, because understand that objectivism, kind of bases everything, all notions. It bases, all human quote unquote rights upon the idea that of like self-ownership. A lot of these very common ideas that exist within libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism. Not all flavors of anarchism, but certainly anarcho-capitalism, that ownership of property is exactly what like that is just the outcropping of the human condition, or something like this. That is not a part of egoism. Okay, self-ownership is not, in fact, and I've talked about this with many people, like the term self-ownership. Now, there's a couple different ways you can go about it. Hoppe has a certain definition of what self-ownership means, and like Walter Block has a different definition of what self-ownership means. Walter Block would make the claim that self-ownership means exactly what ownership means, that it's something you could transfer with title, meaning that you could effectively choose to be a slave. That you could choose to be a slave. Now, I think that is absolutely impossible. Because you can't really choose to be a slave. Okay? You're always like renewing kind of this vow. You're always choosing. And if you're choosing, you're not really a slave. Okay? Outside of, committing suicide or something, right? If you want to have somebody, be a dominant in your life, like in a BDSM relationship, or, something Korean or whatever, other kind of stuff, you're like, the person really with all the power is the submissive, because the submissive is always choosing to allow the dominant to be dominant. Okay. So you can't voluntarily, you really can't voluntarily be, by the dictionary definition, a slave. That's not possible. Okay, as to where Walter Block would kind of say so. And that's one of those areas where I would say that having these hard rules on property, actually, so here's the thing, is that you can make it like a legally binding contract, a voluntarily, supposedly legally which who the fuck knows what this enforcement body is that's going to legally enforce this. And even without governments, who's going to legally enforce your slavery contract to somebody else? Okay. But then isn't that would you call that person free? No, especially if they can't just drop out of the contract, and who knows, maybe the punishment is death if they try to no longer be the slave that at one point in their life they voluntarily voted to do for 7 years, or who the fuck knows how long. Okay. These are the things where the notion of private property, just like And you can listen. I mean, really, you can listen to a lot of libertarians and some others. Okay, they take these notions like just to ridiculous extremes. It's really, really crazy, and they never ever really address the issues of the enforcement body either. Which again, to have private property at the level that even Ayn Rand would talk about and a lot of anarcho-capitalists and others would talk about, at some point you're really going to have some kind of enforcement body involved. Okay, and what do the repercussions look like? I mean, these are all questions that need to have answers, but they're questions that make egoists, make Max Stirner say, you better be careful with property. I'm kind of reminded, Thomas Jefferson had the quote where he said, never let the law get in the way of doing the right thing. Myself, I would stop that and say, never let the law get in the way. Okay? Whether it's the right or wrong thing. But the point being, and I think Stirner was kind of saying something similar, don't let private property get in the way of doing the right thing. And I think that's the major difference between egoism and objectivism, which honestly I think are both. I heard someone say once, like they made the example, like asking what the difference is between egoism and objectivism is like asking what's the difference between an athlete and the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right? Like, what's the difference? They're kind of the same thing. It's just that they have, there's these little points that kind of, like, because egoism is just this ethical stance. Even Ayn Rand would use the term egoism, I think she'd use like the term rational egoism or something along these lines. So I think the main difference between like Stirner's egoism and Ayn Rand's objectivism or virtuous selfishness is that Stirner's egoism, that right to pursue happiness, which Ayn Rand was all about, which is one of the reasons I love her. It doesn't come from the pursuit of property. It doesn't come from owning private property. As to where in objectivism, one could argue that absolutely it comes from your ability to acquire and have property. So, or at least in my opinion, I think that's a clear-cut case. I mean, understand, like I used to be, again, I never consider myself like a capital O objectivist. I mean, you start reading the shit from Leonard Peikoff and everything. I mean, it just gets crazy. Just read Leonard Peikoff talking about the English language, and you will see just how crazy these people got. But because it's nuts. All right, but a lot of what Ayn Rand had to say, fucking great. I mean, absolutely, she was total hedonist, and all about, the pursuit of happiness and all. I mean, that right fucking on. But otherwise, like egoism doesn't have a problem with existence exists. Egoism doesn't have a problem with A is A. There's other things like general semantics that could have a problem with existence exists and A is A. But that's a completely different conversation. But egoism in the raw, has no problem with that. I really think the main difference between the two just comes down to their concepts of property. Is private property the basis of all rights? Or is private property potentially a spook? Something that has to be agreed upon by other individuals? And, does it? I mean, these are big questions. I'm not saying that there's clear-cut answers to all this stuff. But again, keep in mind that egoism doesn't say you can't have property. It just says beware of hard dogmas around property, as to where Ayn Rand is the hard dogma around property. I mean, compared to next to like Rothbard or Hoppe, like she is the hard dogma. So I would say that that's the main difference between those two. And look, I get it. If a system of private property, gives you a security blanket and all that stuff, hey, baby, rock and roll. I may have problems with what and I want to hear how you want to deal with restitution and enforcement bodies and all that if you want to have that in your system. And the biggest question is, what if I don't agree? Because private property, especially under, Ayn Rand, because, she was all about patents and copyrights and everything, which intellectual property, that's one of the easiest things to toss out the door with objectivism, because intellectual property is bullshit. Okay, but, with intellectual property, like, when did, say I want to download a movie, okay, but in your society, like I can access this movie outside of your society, but within your society, through some kind of, injection system or something like that. But within your society, you have to pay $5 for that. But what if I live outside your society and I didn't fucking agree to that? Like, what right do you have to enforce against me when I didn't agree to your society? I just happened, to have the big bad internet and the entire world is fucking interconnected, and so I had access to your movie somehow. Like, I mean, these are huge questions that need answering, right? As to where, usually the people like within that society would probably, want to go after the person that exists outside the society. Hey, you owe me $5, and I would say, well, what do you mean? I never agreed to that shit. So I mean, there's challenges here, with all of this. So yeah, again, now I'm just being verbose. The difference is the concepts of property between egoism and objectivism. Otherwise, like the great example, what's the difference between an athlete and the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Not much. They're really both athletes, okay? Just one has a very specific application. Egoism is a much broader system. In fact, I would dare say, I'll end with this, I would dare say that really hedonism is even the broader application. And hedonism is the thing that we have like a lot of historical precedent for, and that egoism in many ways, I mean, it's almost like chicken and the egg. What's first, hedonism or egoism? And, I guess I should say I don't know, but I kind of feel like hedonism is sort of the larger philosophy in a way. In fact, I said this, I think it was on the Relationship Rhombus show that I did with Stephanie on Patreon. I talked about it. I said, it's like, if like a statist is a hedonist, I can get along with them a lot better than I can with most egoists or anarchists, like in a heartbeat, So there's certain ideas, certain things that really can cross ideological borders, let alone physical or imaginary borders, right? So anyway, okay, I'm going to end off with that. That's plenty. Got other stuff that may be coming out this week. Of course, got a dynamite Sovereign Tech lined up. I can't wait to share it with you. And yeah, glad everybody. We did the Star Trek update episode, a little Star Trek review, because there's that new trailer for Star Trek Discovery that I'm so fucking excited for. I cannot wait. I hope you check that out, and all kinds of other exciting things happening. Still getting the radio station up and running. That's been a hell of a time, and yeah, just other things going on. So anyway, that's enough. New Sex and Science Hour will be out this week as well. Woo! I'll see you on the other side.